May 8, 1945, Lechfeld Airfield, Bavaria. Captain Robert Harmon stood on the cracked concrete runway and stared at the aircraft as if it had landed from another century. The war in Europe had ended 3 hours earlier. Germany had surrendered. The guns were silent, the radios quiet, the sky empty. And yet, sitting in front of him, was a machine that belonged to the future. The jet fighter rested low on its landing gear, swept wings angled back like a predator frozen mid-launch. 2 engines hung beneath the wings, their intakes dark and bottomless. Nothing the Americans flew looked even remotely like it. Compared to this aircraft, Mustangs and Thunderbolts already felt obsolete. 14 of them sat intact on the airfield. The Germans had been ordered to destroy everything useful before retreating. Hitler's final command, the so-called Nero Decree. Most Luftwaffe aircraft around the field lay burned, smashed, or deliberately sabotaged. But these jets remained untouched, lined up in neat rows, their gray skins reflecting the morning sun. Harmon knew what they were. Every bomber crew in Europe knew what they were. German jet fighters, the aircraft that had torn through Allied bomber formations at speeds no escort could match. The machines that had appeared too late and in too few numbers to change the war, but not too late to change aviation forever. His mechanic, a 19-year-old from Detroit named Tommy Kowalski, ran a hand along the smooth metal fuselage of the nearest jet. "Sir," he said quietly, "this thing shot down 17 fortresses last month." Harmon nodded. He believed it. Colonel James Patterson arrived in a jeep, dust billowing behind him. A West Point graduate and intelligence officer, Patterson had spent the last year chasing German technology across Europe: rockets, radar, submarines, anything the enemy had built that might shape the next war. "These are our priority now," Patterson said without preamble. "Every operational jet gets cataloged, tested, and shipped stateside. Wright Field wants them yesterday." There was a problem. The jets didn't run on aviation gasoline. They required a heavy kerosene fuel, scarce, carefully hidden by the Germans during the final months of the war. Without it, the jets were just metal sculptures. The former Luftwaffe base commander, Major Wilhelm Steinmann, sat calmly in Harmon's makeshift office, his Knight's Cross still hanging from his neck. He had surrendered the airfield intact, against orders. When Harmon asked him why, Steinmann didn't hesitate. "Because destroying them would have been a crime," he said. "They deserve to fly." Steinmann agreed to help locate fuel dumps on one condition. "You must promise me," he said, "that you will fly them. Not lock them away. Not scrap them. Fly them." Harmon had no authority to make that promise. He made it anyway. Within hours, Steinmann marked multiple hidden fuel locations on a map. By nightfall, American trucks were rolling back into Lechfeld carrying enough fuel to bring every intact jet to life. The next morning, Soviet tanks appeared on the eastern perimeter. A Russian major named Volkov stepped forward, fluent in English, educated before the war in California. He wanted the jets. The border between American and Soviet zones lay only a few miles away. The agreement about captured technology was vague at best. Volkov argued that whoever arrived first had the right to claim them. For 6 hours, the standoff held. While soldiers waited nervously, Harmon and Volkov sat inside the officers' mess drinking captured cognac and arguing about jet propulsion theory. Volkov knew exactly what these machines represented. "They are the future," he said. "Whoever controls this knowledge controls the next war." Orders finally arrived from higher headquarters. The airfield was American. The Soviets could observe, but not touch. Volkov smiled politely, finished his drink, and stood. "I have already seen enough," he said. Testing began immediately. American pilots approached the jets cautiously. The aircraft demanded patience. The engines took long seconds to spool up. Throttle abuse caused flameouts. Land too hard, and the narrow landing gear collapsed. When the first American test pilot landed after a short flight, his report was blunt. "Fast. Smooth. Fragile," he said. "Maintenance will be hell. But we need this." British and French observers soon arrived, each eager to evaluate the aircraft. Comparisons were uncomfortable. The German jet was faster than anything the Allies had. It climbed harder. It reached altitudes no propeller aircraft could sustain. But it paid for that performance in reliability. The engines barely lasted 20 hours before failure. They were miracles held together by desperation. Investigators soon learned why. The jets had been built underground by slave labor, thousands of prisoners forced to assemble the most advanced aircraft in the world under brutal conditions. Many had sabotaged components wherever they could. Turbine blades failed. Metals cracked. Defects were hidden deep inside systems no one could fully inspect. The future had been built on suffering. Harmon found himself staring at the jets at night, struggling to reconcile admiration with revulsion. One of the German test pilots demonstrated how the aircraft had been used in combat. The attack profile was simple and devastating. Dive from altitude, fire a brief cannon burst, climb away before escorts could react. Bomber gunners had seconds, sometimes less. But the jet's weakness was equally clear. During takeoff and landing, it was vulnerable. Allied pilots had learned to loiter near jet bases, waiting to strike. The aircraft had been brilliant and doomed. By June, Operation Lusty, Luftwaffe's secret technology, was in full force. The jets would be flown, dismantled, studied, and shipped across the Atlantic. Engineers combed underground bunkers and found documents describing swept wings, high-speed aerodynamics, designs decades ahead of anything the Allies possessed. They had not just captured aircraft. They had captured time. And once released, it could never be put back. By early June 1945, Lechfeld Airfield no longer felt like a conquered base. It felt like a laboratory. Every day, captured German jets were rolled onto the runway, fueled, inspected, and flown. Every flight was a gamble. The engines were unpredictable, the metallurgy inconsistent, and the aerodynamics pushed into realms no one fully understood yet. But every minute in the air generated data worth more than gold. American, British, and French engineers crowded around clipboards. They argued over compressor stages, airflow separation, turbine blade cooling. The German mechanics, thin, exhausted men who knew these machines intimately, worked beside them, sometimes correcting Allied engineers who assumed they understood jets better than the people who had built them. They didn't. The jet engines were the greatest revelation. Unlike Allied centrifugal designs, the German engines used axial flow compressors, long rows of blades squeezing air backward in stages. The design was delicate, temperamental, but vastly more efficient. General Electric engineers studying the engines quietly abandoned several of their own projects within weeks. At Wright Field in Ohio, word spread quickly. Everything had changed. Getting the jets to America was another challenge entirely. They couldn't cross the Atlantic. Their range was too short, and their engines too unreliable. The solution came from the U.S. Navy. Escort carriers would transport them like oversized cargo. But first, the aircraft had to be flown across occupied Europe to the French coast. That flight was dangerous. The jets were repainted with American insignia, but their unmistakable silhouettes made them targets. Allied pilots, still keyed for combat, fired on anything that looked German. 2 jets were lost to friendly fire before escorts were added. When the first group reached the coast, cranes lifted them onto carrier decks. Salt air threatened corrosion. German mechanics insisted on precise wrapping and sealing procedures. Even then, several engines were ruined before reaching America. Back at Lechfeld, testing intensified. British test pilot Eric Brown pushed one jet past 600 miles per hour in a dive. The aircraft began to shake violently. Control surfaces stiffened. The jet wanted to tear itself apart. Another pilot discovered that firing the aircraft's cannons at high speed caused a sudden nose-up pitch, enough to stall or overstress the airframe. Several German pilots had died learning that lesson the hard way. The jets were fast. They were not safe. Then came the first American fatality. Lieutenant Mike Rodriguez, 24 years old and newly married, was accelerating for takeoff when his right engine exploded. Turbine blades shredded the fuselage. Control cables snapped. Fuel ignited. The aircraft disintegrated in seconds. The investigation revealed microscopic flaws in the failed turbine blade, metal fatigue, improper heat treatment. Sabotage. Prisoners had built failure into the machines wherever they could. Every remaining jet was grounded. Hundreds of parts were inspected. Dozens were found defective. The future, it turned out, was fragile. The moral debate erupted almost immediately. Should America use technology built by slave labor? Some officers argued the jets should be destroyed, the knowledge buried. Others countered that refusing to use it would only hand the advantage to the Soviets, who were already capturing German factories and engineers in their zone. Pragmatism won. The Cold War was already forming. Meanwhile, German engineers themselves became the most valuable prize. Britain, France, and the Soviet Union all competed to recruit them. America responded with Operation Overcast, later renamed Operation Paperclip, offering safety, citizenship, and unlimited resources. Some engineers cooperated eagerly, others reluctantly. A few vanished east. The knowledge dispersed like shrapnel. At Wright Field, American engineers dismantled the jets down to individual rivets. Swept wings challenged decades of aerodynamic assumptions. Boeing engineers realized their bomber designs were obsolete overnight. North American Aviation scrapped an entire jet fighter project and started over. German data went straight into American blueprints. The transformation was astonishing. In 1945, America had no operational jet fighters. By 1947, prototypes were flying. By 1950, jets dominated the skies. The German jet had arrived too late to save the Third Reich, but just in time to reshape the world. And its final lesson was still to come. By late 1945, the Messerschmitt Me-262 itself was already becoming obsolete. Its engines wore out too fast. Its structure fatigued too quickly. New American and Soviet jets soon surpassed it in speed, altitude, and reliability. But the aircraft's ideas lived on. Swept wings, axial flow engines, high-speed aerodynamics, embedded in every jet that followed. When American F-86 Sabres met Soviet MiG-15s over Korea, both sides were flying descendants of German research. German equations, German wind tunnel data, German mistakes, refined, corrected, weaponized. The Me-262 had not won the war, but it had won the future. The engineers who built it scattered across the world. Some helped send men to the moon. Others designed airliners that shrank the globe. The aircraft itself faded into museums, its once terrifying silhouette now silent and harmless. Yet every time a modern jet lifts off, accelerating down a runway at impossible speed, it follows a path first carved by those desperate German machines. The Me-262 arrived too late to save a regime, but early enough to change human flight forever.